If you've ever wished you had a podcasting pro with nearly a decade of experience whispering growth secrets into your ear, that's exactly what you'll get when you tune into Podcast Growth Tools with me, your host, Kylie Chandler. This is the ultimate show for you if you're ready to grow your podcast audience, skyrocket engagement, and turn your show into a traffic-driving, list-building powerhouse. I've been in the podcasting world since 2015, helping creators like Amy Porterfield grow their shows to over 1 million downloads a month. My superpower? Breaking down proven podcast strategies and marketing techniques into step-by-step guidance you can actually implement without fluff, overwhelm, or guesswork. On this show, we're getting real about what actually moves the needle when it comes to growing your podcast audience and using it to boost your email list growth. From actionable insights and expert interviews to behind-the-scenes secrets, I'll help you turn your podcast into a traffic-driving, list-growing machine. Grab your earbuds, hit subscribe, and let's take your podcast to the next level. Hey, and welcome back to a Podcast Growth Tools episode. So, you know how there's Swifties or there's Harley Hogs? Could you imagine having that for your podcast? Like, I think of Jenna Kutcher. I think she calls them gold diggers. Like, what if you created that kind of brand identity for your podcast? Well, I have a secret for you. You can. And today's guest is going to talk all about how you do that, whether you are dropping your first podcast or you have been around for a long time. Her name is Veronica Romney, and I personally think she's one of the smartest marketers I know. We talk about brand identity. We talk about identity marketing. We talk about what she would do if she was starting her business completely from scratch. We also talk about trends in the marketing place, how you can use AI when you're thinking about identity marketing and still being genuine, plus so much more. This is a juicy, juicy episode. Veronica is so smart. She's worked with big names like Boss Babe, Dean Graziosi, Tony Robbins, and so many other big name companies. So I can't wait for you to get your hands on this episode. And of course, if you love it, be sure to share it, follow, leave a review. I'd be so grateful. And head over to podcastmarketinghub.com/subscribe. Get on my newsletter. I love to send out freebies and good gifts and all the things that you need to make sure you're growing your podcast, you're staying ahead of the game. Thank you so much for being here, and I hope you enjoy this episode with Veronica. Welcome to the show, Veronica.
I'm so excited. Thanks for having me.
I'm so glad to have you here. And first of all, I just want to say huge congratulations on your book that came out this week.
Thank
So
you.
let's start at the top for anyone who is listening who might not know who you are. I don't think there's many, but go ahead. Share who you are, what you're all about, and
Sure.
all of the good things.
Yeah. Well, first of all, if we've never met before, hi, I'm Veronica. A lot of my friends just call me V. It's just easier. So feel free to do so as well. I am a very proud marketer. I proudly identify as a marketer for over 17 years now. And I've seen marketing from all the ways that you could see marketing, like as an entrepreneur, as a solopreneur, as a director, a chief within the walls of an organization, as an agency owner, as a speaker. I mean, like, I feel like I've always been a marketer, but I've been exercising that craft or that discipline differently in different seasons of my career. So, very eras of me. And my recent era is writing a book. And so 2024, I wrote a book called Identity Marketing. And now, January 2025, I am self publishing it to you. And it is one of the most craziest legacy, hardest, it's all the things. Like, I honestly, other than birthing my children, it's probably the closest experience I've had to birthing a book because it takes so long. It's all consuming. It racks your body. And like, you're just so ready for it to be out there in the world. And so I'm really proud to have this piece of work out there and for people to feel good in their marketing. I think that's the thing that was really important to me is I always like cry internally when people go, I hate marketing or I'm bad at marketing. And I'm like, no, marketing, when done properly, can change the world. It can change culture. It can help people feel good about themselves and help people achieve their fullest potential. Like, you're in the business of human transformation. And to do so, you have to learn how to market what it is that you do. But I think marketing has gotten such a bad reputation where we're just pitch slapping our way into a purchase, and we're having to harass people into paying attention to us, or disrupting an experience where they're trying to like escape the world on social media, like, but pay attention to me in this ad. And so identity marketing is taking all of that and flipping it on its head, because we're just speaking to somebody's identity, who they are, who they wish to become, and making sure that our messaging connects with that deep sense of self, so that if they buy from you, it's really an affirmation of who they are and who they want to be. And you don't have to harass anybody into doing what they want to do for themselves, anyways.
That's amazing, and it's so interesting. I've heard so many people say that mamas who release a book say
Hmm.
or drop a book are like, "It's like birthing
It
another child."
is. It is. On Monday,
Uh,
I felt 42 weeks pregnant. I'm like, somebody induced me. Somebody popped this water immediately. I can't hold it anymore.
oh my
It's
gosh, I
funny.
relate to that so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so I love that you briefed us a little bit on identity marketing because when I do think of you, obviously I think of identity marketing and that's what it's all about. And it is a unique approach and it's a refreshing approach. And so I want to dive into two pieces of it. One, how do you feel like it differs from traditional marketing? And then a lot of entrepreneurs who are podcasters obviously are listening to this show. So how does a podcaster use identity marketing when they're creating content, when they're creating and repurposing content, everything like that?
Yeah. So, okay. And I want to give credit where credit is due. Like, if you are at all familiar with James Clear, Atomic Habits, it's his book has sold over 20 million copies. It's one of the most popular books, especially at the start of a brand new year, because everybody wants to get back in the gym and everybody's like trying to get back on their good habits after, like, the debauchery of the holidays. And in the book, literally in the book, in chapter 2, he makes this really strong argument that habits that stick are not because you're trying to achieve an outcome. Habits that stick are based off your identity, how you already identify. Meaning, I'm not going to the gym January 1st because I'm trying to get fit. Because I identify as a fit person, I will be at the gym January 1st, June 1st, September 1st. Like, my actions affirm who I am. So I will eat a particular way, I will dress a particular way, I will work out my body a particular way because I identify as a fit human being. And I feel like our marketing has made the same error that habit forming has made, because most marketing or marketing messaging is very outcome based. Buy this so that you can do this, or that you can have this, or it's very outcome, like, buy this course so you can launch your own course. It's like, oh, okay. But the truth is, all of that is just a means to an end to become something. Like, why do you want to develop a course? Well, because I would like to be an entrepreneur. Okay, that's an identity. And like, having a course might be the way that you package your genius to be a successful entrepreneur, right? Like, that's really what it is, right? And so I just felt like how much of our messaging is around an outcomes based type of dangling of a carrot, when really, if we spoke directly to the core of what somebody is and what somebody wants to become, then their purchase is really going to help them actually sustainably become that thing. Now, where I think unethical marketers and ethical marketers draw the line, at least for me, is like, I'm not trying to convince somebody to be something that they didn't already desire. Like, I have been in a webinar where the speaker convinced me for 40 minutes that I wanted to be a world-class speaker. I didn't have that dream and aspiration before the webinar, but in 40 minutes, he convinced me that I should be a world-class speaker. And then if I only buy his $20,000 package, then I can become a world-class speaker. I think that's unethical. I'm not trying to convince you to be something that you don't already desire to be. Do you want to be a mom? I shouldn't convince you to. Like, it's like my mom trying to convince me to be a mom. Like, that's not going to go over well. Like, I should be a mom for myself. I want to be an entrepreneur for myself. I want to be a great wife for myself. Like, these are things that I desire for myself. When pressured or influenced by other people, it never goes well. You end up in therapy. So, same thing in unethical marketing. We're not trying to sell somebody an identity that they don't currently have for themselves or desire for themselves. We just show them that what we have to offer will help them become the thing they already desire to become.
I love that so much. And I think it's so powerful, especially in what the kind of society we have today when we do see on social. And it's also interesting when we think about like podcasting and the ads, like we've seen kind of a wave of different types of ads in podcasting, and it's very obvious when a podcast host is trying to sell something that they don't use or it doesn't make sense with their business. Uh, or on the other hand, when all of a sudden you're interrupted by an ad that is so out of left field. And I think it can really jar the experience. And I personally cannot imagine that those ads are even doing well.
Or I mean, like minimally, right? Because it's the coldest traffic possible. You're pitch slapping your way for the attention. It's interesting that we bring up podcasts because, so in my book, one of the big things that was really important to me, I have really sexy big brand examples. Like I talk about Taylor Swift, I talk about Harley Davidson, I talk about Barbie. Like I have some really fun ones that everybody's like, yeah. But the truth is, like, I also am the daughter of Cuban immigrant parents who had an air conditioning company for 33 years. So, like, I have such an affection and admiration for small business owners. I identify certainly as an entrepreneur, small business owner myself. And so, like, I didn't want a book that would only be accessible or applicable for the big dogs with the big budgets and the big, all the things, big history, big fame. I wanted to make sure that the framework was perfectly suited for somebody who is operating on their own. And I use a lot of podcast examples. Like, Call Her Daddy is one of the biggest podcasts on the planet. And she calls her people the Daddy Gang, right? It's not my favorite, but it's an example. The other example that I use in the book and on my stages when I do like the keynote version of identity marketing is I always bring up Travis Kelce and Jason Kelce because before the podcast, no one really knew who Jason Kelce was. Like, unless you were a Philadelphia Eagles fan, like, you didn't, centers, that position in the NFL is not well known or get fame or have any commercials. Like, that's, Travis is his own league. The tight ends are always like these like dynamic characters and things like that. But Jason didn't. And so they started this podcast together. And like really early on, people were like really into their dynamic because they're brothers, they're super fun. And the people started like they wanted to call themselves something, and so they were asking the host like, what should we call ourselves? And so they're like, oh, well, let's come up with a cool identity name. Like they pitched around hooligans, they pitched around a whole bunch of, but the thing that stuck, because again, this is the thing about identity marketing, is like you can't call someone something, they have to adopt it. Like, I want to be known as a Harley hog, I want to be known as a Swifty, I want to be known as these things. And so the name of their people they're called 92 percenters. And it's out of affection for the Philadelphia Eagles football play where they like push the quarterback over the line for a first down or a touchdown, and it has a 92% success rate. The tush push or the brotherly shove, it's like this play that they do. And so Jason Kelce it's probably one of his most famous plays because it's a big thing on the center to push their way forward so the quarterback can come right behind him. And because I think they loved him so much and they loved what he did and his personality, they like called themselves the 92 percenters. Cool. That's awesome. But the story doesn't end there. Not only is his podcast getting more and more popular, but then Travis actually starts dating freaking Taylor Swift, which is like, modern day Victoria Beckham, David Beckham of our generation. You're like, oh my gosh, right? And so Victoria, Taylor and Travis start dating. Now, obviously, Taylor Swift has a massive identity marketing play, the Swifties. Like, they saved the economy in 2024. Like, they were everywhere. Her tour was insane. And people went to extraordinary efforts to go see and participate in these, once in a lifetime experiences. So then we saw Swifties, that identity, with 92 percenters come together. And magical things happened. One, Swifties were listening to a football podcast, which they had no business doing before. 92 percenters were adopting the Swifties into their community. They were showing up at the game. So now you have Swifties at football games and you have dads, Brads, and Chads at Taylor Swift concerts. And then what was really cool is the family identity elevated because now mom and dad, sister and brother, uncle and niece are all collectively experiencing either a game or a concert together, being united in this like shared collabed identity. And then the podcast was sold for $100 million to Amazon, all because of identity.
Okay, so this is amazing, and I love how you tell this story. But I wanna know, like, that's great. I love that. How do smaller podcasters or entrepreneurs, how can they have that kind of influence? And I also am starting to think of like niche. And that's like the big, I don't know, with the thing in podcasting, a lot of people are like, stop trying to aim for everyone. Let's get more niche. And so, how does somebody who has a niche business podcast start to integrate that?
Well, this is what's interesting to me because I feel like when I hear that advice too, like niche down, like that's just, don't be for everyone. You're for no one when you're for everyone. Like I've heard that advice my whole marketing career. But oftentimes when people are giving you that advice or that counsel, it's very demographic based. Like when they say niche down, they're like, okay, talk to somebody, talk to a female, a recent mompreneur between the ages of 30 and 30, 9, who is starting her own business for the first time, and like speak to her. And it's like, but okay, yeah, I get that this is how like Meta would want to target this woman on their ad platform too. So most of the conversation around niching down is very masculine energy, but it's also very demographic based. And that's not what I mean by identity. Like, identity is not demographic based. Identity, like a Harley hog, is male or female. A Swiftie can be male or female, can be literally, she gives the hat, her 22 hat, to a little kid every night at the concert, and grandmas are in the stands, like, I'm a diehard. I mean, like, it's just, so I'm not, when I say identity is phenomenal for podcasters, I don't want to make the mistake that we're trying to niche down to a demographic. When I say identity marketing is powerful, it's because how I identify is backed up with how I value and how I see my value in the world, right? Like that's different. Being a Swiftie outside of gender and age and socioeconomic class, being Swifties means being kind, being generous, like the friendship bracelets because of one lyric in one song. Like, and I recently had on my podcast, I interviewed, her name was Olivia Levin. She has this account on Instagram called Swifties for Eternity. She's been running it since she was like 13. I think she's 24 now. So it's like 11-year commit. And so I was like
Wow.
asking her on the interview, I'm like, what's the difference between being a fan of Taylor Swift versus the identity of
Mm.
Swiftie? And she's like, Swifties, that's invested. That's, you earn that and you proudly wear that. Like they know the Easter eggs, they know the meaning behind the lyrics, they know like the ins and outs of why something was written and why it spoke to her when it did and how it reflects me and how I feel today about my chances for finding true love. Like it's really interesting how she define Swifties to the point where I'm like, I feel like it's its own thing, even outside of Taylor at this point. Like the Swiftie community is so uniquely just Swiftie. She's like 100%. I was like, wow, that's fascinating. Now, I bring this up because let's go back to the solopreneur or the small business owner. You have the same potential to leverage identity marketing because all that you're really doing is leveraging the psychology of identity, of self concept, which is fundamental in every human being. And I genuinely feel like so many people are wrestling with their identity right now on the backside of a global pandemic, on the backside of a stifling political atmosphere where people are like screaming down your throat, like, who are you voting for? It's like, I don't even know. Like I don't even know. Like it's just really interesting how much we were confronted with where we stand, whether, and that was asked in different ways, but essentially like, what do you believe in and who are you and where do you stand on certain things? I genuinely believe that small business owners that can answer those questions are the ones who are best positioned to leverage the psychology of identity.
Oh my gosh, I think that's so powerful. And so you mentioned a framework, and I
Yes.
want people to go get your book. But
Oh.
Can you give us a little sneak
Yeah,
peek into
happy
what
to.
that might look like if I wanna
Yeah.
step away today and start working through my
Yeah.
identity marketing?
Yes. Yeah. So that's the cool thing. I did write the book as a how-to book. So you can, for $25, you can literally go do this for yourself. And then, of course, we have workshops that if you want to do it with us and we can kind of grade your paper, grade your work, then by all means, we have that experience as well. But the framework is 4 steps. Easy. It had to be. I couldn't make this like a 15-step process. No one would do it. I wanted you to literally implement what you were reading in the book the same week, the same day. And so the 4 steps, the first step is where you find it. You find your marketable identity because more often than not, you think the pressure is on you to be clever and come up with like daddy gang and 92 percenters. But the truth is, your people will name themselves for you. You just have to kind of secret shop yourself. So we go through this whole practice of like literally secret shopping yourself to find those marketable identities. The second part of the framework is now you have to prove it. We don't want to be gimmicky, and we also don't want to be like, by the way, we have examples where like Pepsi tried to call a whole generation the Pepsi generation, and we were like, no thank you. Or like Budweiser, like bro code, like no, I'm not your bro. Like really successful huge
Interesting.
companies have been gimmicky and trying to like take ownership of an identity of a people. It doesn't work like that. So we have to validate, we have to prove what you found in the first step, and it's actually not that hard. Again, there's way more modern contemporary ways to do it than just like a very expensive focus group. We show you that in the book. The third step is where we name it. So what I mean by that is you have to give context to the name. So even if I discovered in my secret shopping for your podcast that the people wanted to be called peacocks, like we're the peacocking. Oh, okay, cool. Let's whatever. What the hell does that actually mean? So step 3 is you have to give context to the name so that it goes beyond the surface. Like, what is the birth story of this group? What are the non-negotiables? What's the complete transformation? What's that path from start to finish? Like when I call marketers rainmakers, like what does that mean to be a rainmaker versus traditionally identifying just as a marketer on paper in your job title? I have to define that. I have to give it meaning and purpose. It's no different than when you literally give birth in the hospital. You tell people what you named your kid, and the next question is like, well, why'd you name him that? They want to know. We want to know. And then the fourth step is probably my favorite because it's dressing it. It's a personification. So if this identity were to walk in the room, if Beyonce's Beehive, right? Like if they walked into the room or Taylor Swift's Swifty walked into the room, you would know. You would know by what they wore, by the music that they were playing on their Spotify playlist and their, AirPods. You would know by the friends that they carry, that by the space that they felt the most comfortable. Like you would know by their bookshelf. Like you would know this identity and it would feel tangible and it would feel like you could touch it because of the way that you've dressed it. And that's the personification. That's us taking something intangible and making it feel radically tangible.
Okay, so how far along or how big does your audience have to be to start to find out these things?
Oh, so okay. You can literally not have a business right now and do this. We have an example in the book from Nicole. Her name is Nicole Wingard. She is affectionately known on the internet streets as like Nicole the intern. She literally was a $15 an hour intern for a no name recognition non alcoholic beverage company, like one of those mocktail lines. No funding, no investors, just like true underdog of a story. She started an Instagram account from zero called The Best Marketing Strategy Ever. They had a whole bunch of expired cans or cans that were just about to expire. And they're like, here, intern, what do we do with these? Can you do something on social media with this and drum up some like traffic? That problem, that level of unawareness in 60 days led to 500,000 followers. It led to a complete like sell out of lines. It led to Gary Vee noticing her, noticing what happened, and then affectionately joining the Smash Army. And now the Smash Army had renamed the brand. The brand was Mixology, and then they rebranded it to Smashed because of the Smash Army. And that was all because of identity.
Oh my gosh.
So like you could be at 0 and do this. We have examples of all kinds.
Okay, that's exciting. I think that's refreshing because, it's so easy to listen to this and think like, okay, I'll be able to do this in maybe 2 years when my business is or my podcast has X amount of listeners or things like that. That's
Mm-mm.
amazing.
And we have 2 more, like, just off the top of my head. Obviously, Russell Brunson, if you're familiar with his work, I mean, he was very intentional about naming his people funnel hackers from day 0. Like, he was very intentional in the early days of his software company because they had no investor funding. And then Alex Catoni from Copy Posse, she too was very intentional in wanting to elevate the position of copywriter. And she calls them posses. Like they're the posse member. They belong to the posse and they have a philosophy. And I mean, I have countless examples in the book of people who literally were at 0, but it had intentional effort behind identity and the invitation to identify.
Oh my gosh, that's amazing. Okay, this is exciting. This is exciting. And I know that this podcast specifically, well, a lot of the people I work with are more advanced. So at podcasters, they have an audience. So this is easy if they haven't done it. And then there's a lot of people who are always coming into the podcast space every day, starting a new podcast. And so, what an opportunity for them to really understand identity marketing and do it from the very beginning. So, that's wonderful. So I want to shift a little bit to the rainmakers. So you've worked with a lot of big name CEO. When you were sharing your experience as a marketer, I know some of your history and I know it's big name people. You've learned probably so many lessons from them. They've learned so many lessons from you. What are some of your favorite lessons when it comes to growing an online business and marketing?
That's a good question. Well, I think what surprises people because like when they find out that I've worked for Tony Robbins or Boss Babe or whoever, right? Like whoever, anybody with a big visible footprint on social media or with online presence, I think they're always really surprised when I tell them like, you guys, it's a hot mess. They're a hot mess express. Like every time I got behind these characters, every time I got behind these famed personal brands, you would be shocked. Like I think there's this misconception that in order for Boss Babe to have become Boss Babe or Tony to be Tony or Dean or whoever to be who they are, they have figured it out. They got their stuff together and all is well. And it's like, nah, like, no, no, their teams are a mess. Their systems are a mess. They're constantly breaking. Internally, they are constantly breaking. Part of it is the rapid growth. Part of it is the inexperience of these personalities and being leaders. Like most personal brands have never come up in a very formalized company structure because they're gritty entrepreneurs. And so it's never been modeled to them unless they've like been in the military or something. Like they don't understand. And so they're trying to grow this business, but they've never actually had the playbook of business given to them. And so it's messy. Lots of mistakes, lots of fragmentation or Frankenstein roles and team dynamic. You're like, what is happening? So I think that's the first thing that I just remember feeling like, man, these people have it together. Maybe I'll have it together one day. And then I like started working behind them, like, oh, if they can do it, I can do it. like the attitude changed, like, oh, okay, not so intimidating, not so imposter syndrome. So that's like the first big, let me just pop that bubble. And they're human. They're human beings and they have their breakdowns. And I've been on many receiving Voxers of tears and crying and like, oh my gosh, what are we gonna do? Like they're also scared on a regular basis. Can we pay the bills? Like that's very normal that anybody in any position entrepreneurship will have. I don't care if this is your first day on the job or this is like 10 in your business. Like you're gonna go through seasons where you're terrified because that's just the nature of owning a business. And I think as far as marketing lessons go, I think the one thing that is liberating and something very permission giving is that you are absolutely allowed to reinvent yourself. That's like the one thing that these big personalities, like if you really study them or if you really study how they came to be, none of them are really an overnight success. They've been grinding it out forever and ever and ever. And they've had many eras. So just like Taylor has many albums and she's always been a singer or an artist or a songwriter, really is, I think her number one identity. She's had lots of eras. these characters, these big personal brands or podcasters or authors or personalities or speakers, they too have gone through their eras. If I reflect in 17 years of being a marketer, I have not exercised marketing the same time and time. There's a consistency and then there's an inconsistency. And so I think the one thing that I would say is you can totally reinvent yourself. You can plant your flag in this manner, in this way, and then a year from now, 2 years from now, you can plant a new one. That's actually totally fine.
I think it's so refreshing that you say that. In fact, this morning I was speaking with a podcaster who is like, I'm ready to shut down my old podcast. I want to build this new one. I don't know how to do it. And like, you just do it. And you're actually at a benefit because you have all of these listeners who are, want to follow you. She has a little bit of an identity that she can reshape. And actually that makes me think like when you do go through these iterations of yourself, does your identity marketing change with it? And how do you make sure
Oh,
that you're
totally.
allowing it to evolve with you?
100. I mean, like, think about the woman that you were before you had your child. Think about the woman or mother that I was pre-COVID versus
Yeah.
post-COVID, like raising my children in the being a mother of middles, being a mother of littles, being a mother of, older kids. Like, yeah, I'm a mom, but my mother identity is starting to morph and change. And with that, so goes my buying habits. Like, that's the thing. People are constantly in an identity evolution. We are multi-hyphened identity humans. And that's why, like, just targeting somebody based off their demographics is so not working. It's so shallow and honestly it's lazy. Like, really speaking to somebody's identity is important. And I'm going through an identity change right now. Like, on Tuesday, I there's a book. So now I get to say I'm an author. Like, oh my gosh, like, what is it? What does that mean? Like, what does that mean for me? How does that make me feel? What is now how do I want to be remembered versus how I wanted to be remembered, 6 months ago? Like, yes, of course identities change and so do your people. And this is why, like, speaking to an identity who's never purchased from you, you want to be consistent, but having a long-term relationship, you have to understand that your customer's identity is going to constantly be morphing. And so you want to be speaking to that evolution if you want them to buy from you more than once.
Oh my gosh. Well, that's so beautiful. And so as we're talking about all these things, and when I think of one of the smartest marketers, I think of you.
Aw.
So, and you have all the things, right? You have the social, you have the podcast, now you have the book. Where does podcasting exactly. I think and that's the thing. It's like easy to feel that just like, oh, yeah, it
I'm
is a lot.
tired.
But where does the podcast fit into the marketing and how can it support a
Oh,
business?
yeah. Well, and I think people use podcasts in different ways. Ultimately, it's a tool. I think there's a lot of people that will use a podcast because they really want it to drive traffic and they really want it to just increase their exposure, right? That's a very specific strategy, which usually is like more volume play. Like, old podcasters of the day, like, the advice was like, well, you want more downloads, double the amount of episodes per week. Like, and so people I literally know some podcasters that went to like daily episodes because they just wanted more volume, more downloads. Like, that's not really working anymore, but like that was a big strategy back in the day. I knew when I started my podcast, I could care. I literally don't care. Like, I just had an episode where I interviewed Seth Godin on my podcast, which he's like the goat. You want to talk about marketing goats and legends? It's Seth freaking Godin. The guy's like
So
22
good.
book published. I was sweating interviewing him. I was like, oh my gosh, right? And I remember, like, I did it, I released it, and then I was just like so euphoric that I had this conversation with, like, easily one of my most favorite, like, I look up to this individual as a marketer to another marketer. And recently somebody was like, well, how many downloads did your podcast get with Seth Godin? I'm like, I don't even know. Like, I don't even, and I only say that because when I started the podcast, I didn't, and I still obviously, because I actually couldn't even tell you right now how many downloads I have with Seth. Like, I genuinely don't care. I don't care how many downloads the Rainmaker podcast gets. To me, the podcast has always been a tool for relationship marketing. Like it's a tool for me to like have a conversation with somebody who otherwise wouldn't give me their time. And only in over 100 episodes, only one person has ever asked me to provide proof of number of downloads and how successful and I was like, what? Literally no one else, not a former campaign manager for a US president, not the head of marketing for Yeti, Levi's, Pinterest, Seth Godin. Like these people have never asked me to produce proof on why they should be giving me an hour of their time to be on my podcast. They're just honored to be on a podcast and be interviewed. And I got even more daring and brave when I found that out. I was like, oh, no one cares. Cool. I'm going to ask but now then it became like, who's on my wish list? Like it's like Santa's wish list. Like if I could interview these humans, like who would I selfishly want to just talk to and make them my friend, even if you never heard the conversation ever? And that's literally been the driving force behind my podcast.
I think that's so great. And when I do think about, for me, the podcast has always been nurture, provide value. And then naturally, as we do that, when we have an ask or when we say, join me on my email list or whatever it might be, like it's such a natural yes. And so I feel like it's all full circle because it's all part of that identity marketing. But being able to have the platform to just let them get to know you so easily without a lot of extra, I mean, it's a lot of work, but I think
It is. I
it's,
mean, if you have the right team around you, right?
yeah.
It's not that bad. Like I have an editor, I have a team. Like I have people. Like I'm not self-producing. I'm not editing myself. Well, that would like bleed my ears. Like I can't do that. I just genuinely want to like show up and have a conversation with a really cool person, and the camera just happens to be on. But because I think I've had that attitude, you're right. Like your most authentic self is present when you don't care what the net effect will be. Like when you are removed from the outcome of that conversation, when you're just present to have the conversation, I think that's what people really resonate with. And then they get excited and then they're like, I loved the, my favorite, because the words of affirmation are my love language through and through, is when people will like DM me, like, I heard your podcast with Kathy Hiller. I heard your podcast with Seth. I heard your podcast with so and so. And like, I really like, I still get messages like that from a podcast that I did or that I was hosted on, 8 months ago. Like, it still happens. And like, that means a lot to me more than anything else.
Oh, I couldn't agree more. Okay, this is fun. I'm thinking about as we talk about creating systems or like I love that. I love the candid honesty with behind the scenes of big names. I get it. Been there. And so
Yeah.
let's talk a little bit about AI and how does cuz I would imagine as you're using AI for creating content or whatever, how do you infuse your identity into that because it can become so it can become so robotic, but you can train it. So, how does that fit
Yeah.
together?
I know other podcasters and other personalities who have trained AI on their voice. And so they will literally have AI replicate or fix errors or things like that. I'm terrified to do that. So I have not trained AI on my voice. That terrifies the out of me. So like I'm not there. The most that we use AI internally right now is probably mostly for like title ideas and the summation or the summary of the podcast episode that we can put on the website. Like we use it, I think, to like save us time on like post production copy, but I'm not using AI to do my questions. I'm not using AI to like pre do anything. Anything that I ask my guest is because I want to ask my guest. I know other podcasts, and I'm not saying this in a negative. I actually, you could totally leverage AI to be like, hey, AI, I'm having Seth Godin on my podcast. He's been interviewed by everybody. Can you help me come up with questions that he has yet to be asked? Like that would be a really good prompt, I think, right? That would be a really good prompt if I was a brand new podcaster and I wasn't as comfortable in my interviewing abilities to like just think of a question on the fly or weave their answer into the next question. Like that comes with like repetition. I would totally leverage AI on the front side and be like, hey, AI, I'm about to interview this person. Tell me what you know about them. Tell me little known facts that not people know. Like I think that would be a really great use of AI to do your research and your homework and then help you on the copy and the post production side. That's how I think it can be certainly used. And there's great tools like Cast Magic. Like there's some phenomenal AI tools, especially if you're literally having to do everything yourself. But I just don't be careful not to over depend on AI. It will literally stunt your abilities to be in the moment too. Like you can tell that I'm the generation of spell check. Like I'm so used to having somebody spell check me that it's like sad. Now I worry for my children. Like,
Oh, 100%. I've had those thoughts as well. Like, there's so many things. I'm like, oh my gosh, Clove is not even going to know how to
yeah,
do XYZ. We're going to have to
yeah,
teach her
yeah,
the
literally.
manual way of spell checking. Um, oh my gosh. So, what would you say a common mistake that you are seeing in marketing today? I mean, we talk about people changing and having different iterations. Marketing is constantly evolving and constantly changing. What do you feel like there's common mistakes that we as marketers, online marketers, can avoid?
The one that always kind of like surprises me is where I'll get a distress call. And it's like the bat signal goes up, Gotham's on fire, but it's like a V signal and it's like, Veronica, like my marketing's not working. And I'm like, okay, like how long have you been using this messaging? How long have you been wrapping the same offer in the same way? Oh, for like 12 launches. Like I understand that if it ain't broke, don't fix it. Like I get it. Like I get that we don't want to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Like I understand in principle why, like, if you found something that works, cool. But like also really, like I think I'm just surprised sometimes how infrequent we in marketing type positions are auditing ourselves or taking a moment to like go outside of the jar, read the label through the jar. Like that surprises me when they're like, it's not working anymore. I'm like, well, yeah, it's dated messaging. That pain point that you were exacerbating 5 years ago, like if you were talking about labor force issues, the labor force today is dealing with radically different issues than it was pre-pandemic. Like like of course so your messaging would have to tweak even if the offer is the exact same. If you haven't freshened up your messaging or freshened up the wrapping paper around your services, your offers and your products, like I'm always surprised I think by that missed obvious one. I think not that I'm accusing people of being lazy, but like come on, like even politicians have to reinvent themselves every like voting cycle. It's wild. So I think that one always surprises me. I think the other thing that I am just over is we do this in my workshop in one of the identity marketing intensives right at the beginning of the first day. We talk about like unethical, pushy, pitch slappy type of marketing. And I'm like, listen, before I teach you identity marketing, let's just vent. Let's just get it out of our system. Let's just purge. And so I have this exercise where everybody like reflect on the last 12 months or in the last 5 years or whatever, however far back your memory wants to take you of like really crappy marketing. And then the whole room just like fake deadline funnels or fake this or fake urgency, fake scarcity or this or fear mongering. Like everybody just starts like venting. Like I'm like, okay, how does that feel? Like get that off, like
Ah,
just get it off your
marketing
chest.
therapy.
Yeah, just
Yes.
get it out there. I'm like, okay, guess what? We don't do that anymore. Like, yay, celebrate. So I do think that buyers, thank freaking goodness, like we are more discerning. We don't trust you nearly as much as we used to. You're a little bit guilty until proven innocent. And like that, I know that can be frustrating, but in fact, for the ethical ones, the good providers, that's actually a really good thing for us because we will stand the test of time. Where those that are just doing it for money, they'll they'll find money somewhere else. Like that's just how it works. And so you want somebody who's more discerning in their buying habits because then when they do buy from you, man, they're all in and they're going to tell their
Mhm.
mom and their cousin and everybody else.
Full circle identity
Mhm.
marketing. Okay, so what marketing strategies are you excited about going into the new year?
I mean, beyond the obvious identity marketing, yes, I'm very excited to see this in the world. I'm blown away by the number of people who've ordered books, and just like I to think that people will have this like ability in their hands. I'm like so excited to see that happen. I think the other thing that I am noticing in my peers and those that I think are just some of the smartest humans also is a return. It's almost like a renaissance. Like there's this a return to intimacy and proximity. I am starting to hear a lot of my friends who were like, scale, 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 with all good intention, but like, scale, 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 that are like, I don't want to scale anymore. I want to actually simplify. I want to trim so that I can be more available to those that I'm working with. And I'm like, yes. Cause again, I'm such a
Yeah.
relationship person that I'm like, yeah, I don't want to date you and like 10 other dudes. Like, I want to just date you. Can we just date, you know? And I think that's how your buyer feels. Like, I really appreciate all these, extra coaches and extra this and extra that, but like, can I just have more of you? And I think that's what's the request. Like I can even tell in my buying habits that I don't even want to be in like a group experience, or if I am, it's more intimate. I really just crave individuality. I crave one-on-one time. And certainly when I'm in the position to be a recipient of service where I'm feeling vulnerable. And I do think that we are seeing a little bit of a renaissance to just high quality work that's more intimate.
Mm. I couldn't agree more. I 2 people immediately came to mind that have completely like, big names that have shifted massively in the last 6 months or less, and I think it is more of this, I wanna pour into the people who have honestly, like, who are the insert identity marketing
Yeah,
name,
my
and I wanna
peoples.
pour my people, I wanna pour into them, and they know me intimately, and so I'm excited to see that, especially as, like, a newer entrepreneur. It's just exciting because that's why most entrepreneurs get into it anyways, right? They wanna help, and then in the for so many years, it was scale, 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 so it's exciting that
It
it's
is. And
coming back up.
again, I think it's gonna purge the industry. It's your As you start to fish and shop around for who you want to work with, those that prioritize intimacy and proximity will be very
Mm,
clear versus those that have scaling type of energy. It's
right.
like it's just energetically one is just way more pushy and one is more receiving. And I'm just really excited for that change in the industry, hopefully.
Okay, so on that, do you feel like what's the way for an online marketer to go? Is it low ticket offers? Is it digital courses? Is it masterminds? Is
No.
it one-on-one? Like, what is it?
I not everyone's gonna love me for this.
We all
I
love you no matter what.
well, I'm just gonna be really honest. With AI, I mean, even Google results, like you go to Google, instead of getting like blue links, you're getting Gemini telling you an answer. So like at some point, putting a price on education is not really smart, because the education is high quality and free on YouTube University, Chat GPT, Gemini. Like it's just a race for giving you great information at a fingertip because of these technologies. So I'm not really investing in that. And I also don't want to go through 80 hours of your course material to figure out my answer to my question or to my thing. So like I'm not interested in that, right? I genuinely believe that small business owners or up and coming business owners or solopreneurs, if you can start prioritizing and offering done with you, done for you, service oriented type that is higher ticket, like it's not low ticket. As soon as you put your finger on it, now it's manual and it should cost what your time is worth, right? I think those actually will do much better than you trying to shove piece of your brain into a low ticket, scalable something of digital nature. And my whole thing, too, this is what has always bothered me. If you can't perform a transformation one to one, what gives you the right to put it in an offer that's one to many? That really has always very much bothered me. And I know there's been a lot of providers that like they are so intimidated and they will never work with somebody one on one, but then they'll put out a course teaching somebody how to do something. I'm like, wait a minute, if you're not comfortable to be fully seen in a one-on-one capacity, whether or not what you're teaching is actually going to drive results and be held accountable to that, then what makes you put that out in a volume of hundreds and hundreds with like some crappy legal language that like, oh, if you do everything right and you're still not happy, then we'll give you a refund. Like, what? So I if I were to start my business literally over tomorrow, if I was nobody, like no podcast, no book, no nothing, I would literally go into my phone right now, like my phone. Who do I have immediate access to? Which means like I can text you, I can call you. And I would run through my phone and be like, who can I serve in the best way possible? I would literally start my business that way before I ever went into a scalable offer mode.
Mm. The other really powerful piece to all of that is that you have when you have that close proximity and that direct access to your people, you're not trying to figure out what their problems are. And then when we talk about messaging changing and it's not working anymore, it's you have it at your fingertips. And I think that that's such a powerful thing when it comes to marketing or creating podcast episodes or whatever it might be. So, oh, well, I just, you know it. I love you so much.
We were friends. We're friends.
Your marketing is, I mean, you are just you're a little bit of the goat when I think about marketing.
Oh,
So you
stop.
are so brilliant. Okay, so here's a fun one for you.
Okay.
What one or two podcast hosts, or if they're even, it's okay
Oh.
if they're a couple or a duo, who would you want to sit down with, and what kind of questions would you want to ask them?
Oh my gosh. Okay. So I'm 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 gonna go outside of my marketing bubble. I can't I can't consume enough of a woman named Dr. Stacy Sims. I don't know. She last year she was on Andrew Huberman's podcast and it blew up for her. So I'm really happy for her. And then she just released her episode on Stephen Bartlett's The Diary of a CEO. So her name is Dr. Stacy Sims. She is one of the most published, legit women who has studied high performance in females. And her whole thing is like, women are not small men, so stop it. Like, I love it. And so I have recently been in a very big health journey because of my sister's breast cancer diagnosis. And so I can't literally I cannot consume more. Like, I'm ferociously consuming everything that I can when it comes to like longevity and health and eating for fuel and eating to feel great and like living to 100 and being a centurion. And so when I came across her work, I'm just kind of obsessed with her. So like if I could pick anybody and sit with the person and ask them all my questions. Again, I don't care if you don't listen to it. I want to ask her my selfish questions. It would be her.
I remember that Huberman interview
Oh,
very vividly. It's so good. She's so
so
good. Wait,
good.
she has a podcast though?
I don't know. She does. I know she does. Like, she has a new. I'm on her newsletter. She's been on everybody's
Okay.
podcast. Maybe she doesn't have her own podcast. Maybe she's not a host. She should be. Oof.
Hey, I like it. I'm gonna have to get on her newsletter because
Yeah.
I loved everything she said, and
Yeah.
yeah,
She's
as a woman,
brilliant.
as a new mom, and all that good stuff. Oh,
Mhm.
well, that is so good, Veronica. Thank you so much for being here. Please tell my
Oh.
listeners where they can go to get your book. I ordered a few of them in bulk, so maybe I'll give
Oh.
some away.
So we've created this world, right? So if you go to identitymarketingbook.com, you can buy the book there, but even if you've already purchased the book, we have this section called Stuff of Legends. And if you go into there, you can have a playlist, you can have a private podcast with interviews that influence the book. We give you digital assets to upgrade your workspace. We went really over the top. We created a quiz that will tell you which chapters to read first so that you don't have to read all 35,000 words. It will pinpoint exactly which chapters are perfect for where you're starting in your marketing journey or where your marketing struggles are. And then we'll tell you just read these first before you read the rest. So like we try to do everything that we can that you can like extract every morsel of value specifically for your needs from this piece of work.
Okay, that quiz though, whose idea was that? That was so smart.
Um honestly, I was reading Tim Ferriss's 4 Hour Body. He has very controversial stuff, so I'm not promoting this. Let me just be very clear. His book is a little bit like, what? And also, I think he doesn't differentiate between men and women enough. But the
Mhm.
point is, he has early on in the book, he's like, hey, if you're just reading this book for fat loss, prioritize chapters 2, 6, and 8. If you're just prioritizing or you're trying to like bulk up, da da da. So he didn't do it as a quiz. He did it as a chapter that said, hey, if these are your specific goals, fat loss, muscle gain, whatever, better sex, like he just had these different categories. he then like gave me the cliff note chapters. I thought that was so bloody smart because the book is ginormous. And I was like, wait a minute, we could turn that into a quiz for our book because we have so many stories of either big, like if it was a big brand that was answering that quiz, then you should listen to the big brand examples. But if you're a small brand or you have no brand, you should pay attention to this chapter, right? So that was the idea, was because I was reading that in his book.
I think it's so smart, so
Thanks.
brilliant, just like you. Veronica, I just appreciate you, and I can't wait to get this out into the world and
Oh,
celebrating you this week as you are
hug.
doing all the amazing things.
Hug, friend. What you just have been so sweet since you literally got dropped into my life and my world, and I'm such a fan of yours as well. I think you are really, really, really smart as a marketer, and
Mm,
I mean,
thank you.
girl, you can have your pick of whatever you want to do. So you get to be choosy, and I think it's really cool that you have this podcast helping people.
I appreciate you.